We need to take that one little step. And the more little steps that you can take that get you on that right track, to get you out there running, it's really learning to be able to, for me, it's the second step is the one that provides you with the most impact. Because a lot of people can take that first step. You can jump out of the plane and bang, I've done it. But can I do it again? Can I take that next step? Can I keep going? Can I keep that ball rolling?
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Dashdot Insider, the auditory epicenter for passionate property investors seeking a life of freedom, choice, and abundance. I'm your host, Emil Pinder, and joining me today, I'm very excited about this, Matt Brady. Now, I've known Matt for a little while, and Matt is an absolute expert in motivation and momentum, a life coaching space and business coaching space where gaining momentum, finding that little spark of ignition that can really transform your life is really an area that Matt specializes in. But also, Matt, curiously, you are Australia's leading firewalking and glass walking instructor. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about that?
Thanks, Emil. That's a pretty interesting introduction. And I have to say, it's something we've been doing now for 22, 23 years, right across the country. It's a great challenge on teaching people really how to push past barriers that they have in life, and understanding the fear and anxiety that comes up when confronted with a challenge, and how their brains and bodies work in regards to it, and how they can push past those challenges.
I've done a firewalk. I've only done one. I haven't done the hundreds that you have. To me, when I did that, it did feel like there was it feels like it's a great metaphor. And sort of you walk away from it feeling really, really empowered. But jumping away from that for a moment, I want to talk to you a little bit about the motivational space, especially as it pertains to investors. So in your role, what role does having a compelling vision of the future play in motivation the way you see it? What's your interpretation?
Well, I think a compelling future, like you've got to have a brighter tomorrow. And it's got to be something that no matter the obstacles and challenges that you'll have in life, if you've got something that's compelling, that's driving you forward, that you're trying to constantly get to, that'll help you overcome the challenges that you have, the setbacks that you have, the challenge. I mean, you think about life, like it's at the moment we live in a space that's just moving at a rapid rate, right? And so there's so much uncertainty. And if you've got a compelling future, something that's you're really driving to obtain, and it's bigger than just you, it's something that's really could be your lasting legacy, could be something to do with family, but it's got to really drive you, something that excites you, that gets you up of a morning.
One point that you mentioned there was the uncertainty. I mean, I guess goals and the bigger vision that a person might have for themselves can change over time. You know, when you're 5 years old, you want to be a firefighter or a pilot or, whatever it might be. You get a little bit older and it's like, no, actually I want to be a football star. You get a little bit older and, the dreams can change and, you meet the right woman or man or whatever it is in your life, the right partner, and then it's family, or it could be, there are all sorts of different things that it could be. And up until maybe 5 years ago, it felt like people's dreams and aspirations, the vision that we had for our futures, were all they all might be quite different, but they seemed realistic and they seemed kind of achievable or aspirational in a genuinely practical sense. You hit on the word uncertainty just then. How different are you seeing the way people are putting together their goals now? Is it with the same degree of certainty, even though the world might be uncertain, their objectives, their goals might be very certain, or are things really kind of turned on their head a little bit? What are you seeing from the people that you're working with, etc.?
I think it's a really good question, and there's a lot of change that's happening in the world, especially, if I think pre-pandemic, we had a very linear approach to the way things were panning out. We knew a logical step of one after the other. And I think the process that we all went through across the globe, it slowed us down. We reassessed things, we looked at things, and then it kind of feels at the moment in the last couple of years, we've really gone exponential. Like it's just exploded. So now it's not so much the tried and true methods that we had that were a very linear approach, one step after the other. I mean, we can take a range of different options, and it's that uncertainty of going, well, this could be anything now, and it's sped up. You can look at the way that some people are obtaining things. They're doing it in a way that's, if you follow the proven systems, and there's so many different ones out there now for a range of areas, whether it be performance or investing or whatever, there's systems out there to follow that can just speed things up at an exponential rate. And that gets a bit challenging at times. It's a bit concerning because we don't understand. We like to know all the steps, and sometimes we can't see all the steps, and we have to trust that. And I guess that's a little bit, that leads me back to the original part where we were talking about the challenges that we do. Sometimes we've just got to trust in ourselves and learn to take that first step, I guess. And that's where I'm seeing the world go at the moment. We've just got to back ourselves and believe in ourselves enough that we're on the right track and take that step and keep assessing as we go.
I think that what you just said, keep assessing as we go, is really key. I think, I have a lot of friends, I have business colleagues, a lot of people that I'm very fortunate in my position. I get to interact with a lot of people at Dashdot, clients. I get to interact with, a very broad spectrum of people. And sometimes the conversation around goals and objectives, dreams, that sort of thing pops up. And now with this extra layer of uncertainty, what is government policy going to be about X? What's happening with the economy here? All of this sort of uncertainty feels like people really have two options. The first option is, well, that's my goal. I'm going to get it no matter what. I used to be able to follow, as you said, a very linear approach. If I do this, then I do this, then I do this, then I do this. I could sort of plot it out, and there is a degree of surety. There's a degree of certainty that you have around that. Now it's like, well, we have to have all of these contingencies in place. So if this happens, then I'm actually just going to change tack. I'm going to do this. I'm still going to get my goal, though. Nothing changes the goal. Nothing changes the dream. Nothing changes the objective. And I would say I see some people who have that mindset, like I merely need to adapt, right? Darwin, it's not the fastest, it's not the strongest, it's not the fittest animal or species that survives. It's the species that is most adaptive to change. And so I do know a lot of people who are sort of like, well, this was the plan, but this is now happening in the economy, or this is now happening wherever. I'm keeping the same objective. I'm just making sure that I have a few more contingencies in place to cover off the ifs. And I know some other people who've decided, oh, that's not my dream anymore, because that can't happen. What's your kind of take on that? And is there a situation or a case to be made that they might both be legitimate, or is one a bit better than the other?
I think you want to really look at your overarching goal. What is it? What's the dream, the desire that you've got? What is that big picture that you've got? That's the compelling future, right? Like when you have that compelling future, that's big, that's challenging, it's scary. You're not going to achieve it tomorrow. Like this is something that you're going to have to keep working towards. And all the little goals that you achieve that might take a year or two, they're the stepping stones along the way to achieving that end aim. And for me, I think that's the part of saying, what is the end aim that I've got now? And look, for somebody who's 21, that goal, that end aim, that'll change over time because, as you said, you meet your partner and you get married, you have a family, and some of those goals then change and grow to other ones. So sometimes it's not so much, I guess, saying that I can't achieve that anymore. It's just not relevant in my life anymore for the period or where I am in life to achieve that. Things have changed, and what is the goal now? And sometimes you get halfway along to a goal and you realize that really I want this goal that's a lot higher, and I've gotten to here. I could keep going to here and get this, but that's not really what I want now. I'm going to change tack a little bit and come over here.
Yeah, I'm halfway up the wrong ladder.
and it's going to grow and change. That's the beauty of life.
Perhaps there's a case to be made then that there are two types or there are two situations where people's goals may change. The first is when genuinely they start to desire something else. The second is when they downgrade their original vision for some reason. And I think this is the really important one. That could be because of uncertainty, as we've talked about, but also it could be something that I know you're a real expert in, and that is fear and the significance of recognizing the psychological signs of fear and worry and doubt in managing investment-related decisions, goal-oriented decisions, and things like that is really important. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, the fear's an interesting part, right? Like it's inbuilt in us, and if you want to be able to achieve a really big goal in life, something that's really challenging, and it's going to stretch you, there comes uncertainty with that. And with uncertainty brings what you mentioned before, fear, worry, doubt, the whole conundrum of everything that could happen. And look, that's been fantastic in life to be able to keep us alive for centuries and centuries. It's hardwired into us to be able to see the negative, because the negative keeps us alive and stopped us, being trodden on by a dinosaur or eaten by a tiger. And, when we hear when we hear a noise in the bush beside us, right, we don't think instantly, oh, puppy dog, right? We think, oh, snake or something that's there, right? Like it's 7 out of 10 times. That's where our brain goes, and it fills in, it fills in the gaps, right? And it kept us alive and enabled us to be able to adapt. But for me, I guess when we look at that fear, for me, fear stands for a simple little acronym. It's fictional events appearing real, because 99% of the time, the event's not actually happened yet. It's something that we've built the picture in our brains. So we built the image about what could happen. And if you wanted to take it specifically to an investing decision, right? And it doesn't matter what period of life, but we're sitting in the investing context right now. And people that want to be able to invest, so they're looking and they're saying, okay, here's what I want to have happen. Here's the investment I want to be able to get into, or here's the thing I'm looking to achieve. And the trouble is they build up the negative kind of things that happen. They go, oh, what if it doesn't work? Okay, so I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to not do it. But they don't explore that what if. They don't explore the gaps and see the gaps that we have in life. We fill it in our brains. So if we don't understand something, we don't know something, we quickly fill it in. And we go, what if, oh, it doesn't work? Okay, so I won't do that. But we need to explore the gaps, because the power really is in those gaps. And if we explore that properly and we understand what the negative or the positive could be, the gaps just stands for to gather, analyze, predict, and strategize. It's a really simple process. So if you are fearful about something, you are stressed about something, gather all the information, analyze it. What are the worst things that could happen with it? Predict it then. So really extrapolate out the negative side of things to understand it. Because if you don't understand it, you're gonna make it up. And we already know we're going to make it up to be negative. 7 out of 10 things that we come up with will be negative, because that's how we're hardwired. So if we look at changing that and understand what's the real negatives that could come from it and expand on what's the worst thing that could happen if I go into this investment, and then what is the worst thing that could happen out of that? What if it goes wrong? What's the worst that can happen? If you keep going through all of those things and you look at all the negatives and all the positives too, don't get me wrong, you look at both sides of it. Gather as much information as you can. Analyze them, all the negatives and positives, what they are. What's the prediction? What's the likelihood of those happening, both negative and positive? What's the likelihood of it? And then you start to ask yourself a strategy of like, well, if this happened, could I live with it? So is it a 10% chance that it could go bad, or a 90% chance that it could go bad? Where in my life, as am I 20 years? I mean, I've got a higher risk threshold, or am I, pushing 70 and I'm going, oh, I'm a little bit lower. I need to maintain. I don't have as many years left as a 20-year-old to be able to look at continuing to invest as risky. And so you start to look at those things and then you assess, well, what are the likely outcomes of them, negative or positive? And if they were to happen, could I live with those? Because once you've made that decision and you've got the whole picture of what the fear could be and that you're worrying and all the doubt that could come up with that, once you really understand that, then you can make the decision and the strategy to go forward or not. And either is the right choice.
Because everything that happens after that is positive on the worst case scenario that you've already sort of played out in your mind.
Well, you've already played it out. You've already accepted it, right? You've said, well, if this happens, I can accept that. I don't want it to happen, but I can accept that it could happen. And I've made my decision to go, now I put all that negative aside. I don't worry about it anymore. And I just say, I'm done with that. I understood it could happen. So I'm going to take that, put it over here in a box, and I'm going to put all my attention now onto the positive, what I need to do to make that happen.
Okay. Well, I think, a lot of people who follow this podcast are very aspirational, right? Most people in Australia even understand that there is a lot of importance on having a clear goal and articulating that goal, writing it down, whatever. And if that goal involves any financial wealth whatsoever, it's extremely unlikely that you'll be able to save yourself to wealth by squirreling away a certain amount of your salary every month and that sort of thing. And therefore, people look for vehicles that are going to help them. And the vehicle that seems to be the asset class of choice and has performed admirably, amazingly well, it's beaten everything else for the last 50 years, is property. You can leverage against it and things like that. But then it's a high-ticket item. It's not like you're buying a little bit of gold where, it's $1,000 here or $2,000 there. It's a bigger amount of money. And we can map out and project, and we develop the portfolio growth plans to help people understand all of the things that should happen on the upside. But there is often still some sort of fear that holds people back and prevents them from making a decision. And it happens to people across all ages, I find. It's a really clear cross-section. And the reason for that is because young people don't necessarily understand everything that they need to about, they haven't been bashed around by 3.5 property cycles. And so for them, it's fairly new. And also, the kind of deposits and the investment that you need to get into property represents a very, very high proportion of their net worth. And so they have anxiety and they have fear around that prevents them from making a decision. At the other end, people might be 45 or 50, and they might be thinking, I really need to get this right, because if I don't get it right, I don't have that long in my working life to earn it back. And so we do see this hesitation. I'm kind of reminded of two things. Socrates saying, I believe it was Socrates, it may have been Mark Twain, who said, I've suffered a great many tragedies in my life, but most of them never came to pass. I think it was Mark Twain. And how many disasters we imagine versus how many actually come true is there's a massive difference. And was it Maimonides, the guy who said, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, teach a man to fish, he'll feed him for a lifetime. He said the risk of a wrong decision is preferable to the terror of indecision. And not making a decision is a decision, right?
Well, correct. 100%. It is. It's making a decision because you're sitting there on the fence and you're not going to go anywhere. And when you're talking about those, it's. I remember hearing a quite very similar saying, that the hero dies but once, but a coward dies 1,000 times. Like the fact of it's constantly when you're not. When you don't make that decision and you're sitting on the fence, you're constantly deciding not to act. So it's the indecision of not acting keeps you there, and you keep getting the same result over and over. And that indecision, then that's dying 1,000 times, basically, because every time you do it, you're not getting there, and you go, how am I going to get there? Oh, I can't do it. And so it's a slow, continual response to getting the negative that you don't want. And I guess it's one of the things I often say to people, I ask the question, would you regret not doing this? And it's a real simple process for me to be able to say, take yourself out to your later years and you're pushing 100 and you're sitting on your deck chair and out in the rocking chair and you're thinking, I haven't got long to go. Would you now look back at this and say to yourself, man, if I'd only done that, what difference would it have made? Because that then helps you make that decision. Would you go in it or not? Like if you're sitting on the fence and going, oh, yes, no, but this could happen. Like, would you really regret? And so I guess at times like, I've had things that have gone exceptionally well and I've had things that have gone exceptionally bad too, as we all have in life. And I'd rather be able to look back and know that it didn't work out than look back and go, what if? What if it did? Imagine like I'm sitting there at 90 and it's like, if I'd only done that.
You don't want to check out wondering, right?
No, I mean, you want to.
When the time comes, you don't want to be wondering. You don't want to have that big question. I think it's easy for us to say, because we both have investment portfolios. We're both doing all right. It's easy and there are a lot of seasoned investors out there that would probably give the same advice to somebody who's on the fence about, should I be making the big leap or should I be doing X? And as you said, the hero dies once, the coward dies 1,000 times. It's easy for us in our position to say, just jump. It'll be okay. You'll land on your feet. It'll be okay. It's easy for us to say, just go for it. But for somebody who's kind of in that position where a deposit on a property or doing X, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be property, but taking that action that involves risk, it's still scary. How can investors effectively balance the need for risk-taking with a desire to minimize the uncertainty? And the reason I ask that question is because I feel like the uncertainty is what creates the fear, which creates the hesitation, which creates the lack of action.
Yeah, it does. And it's a really interesting question, Emil, because, desire and fear, the opposite of two coins, right? We desire to have this and we want this, but yet we have this fear holding us back because it's too risky and I might lose out. And I guess for me, like, there's never been a better time than right now. Like people look at it and say, I'm 50 and, I'm 50, I've got nothing, I've got to look after it. I mean, if you were 50 and it was, I don't know, the 1800s, you haven't got long to go, right? But 50 now, you've got another 50 years to go roughly with the way modern science is going. And there's never been a better time than right now to be able to look at it. And if you really understand all the risks, all the complications, and look at them all, that's what I say to people, like really explore all of it. Like the knowledge is in the gaps, the power's in the gaps. Gather, analyze, predict, and strategize everything that's there. If you really understand the fear and what is that underlying fear, then you can actually look to be able to utilize that to step forward. And one of the things that I guess it brings up is the fact of, if you understand what's the complications under there, and then you come back to the very first question you asked me, the compelling future. The compelling future can't be just to have, a property or 10 properties or whatever the property portfolio is. That's not the compelling future. Like that's a stepping stone towards the compelling future. The compelling future is, what is that going to give you? What is the legacy? Because a compelling future, it's not about you. It's more about those that are with you and what you're going to do for others that are around you.
Exactly. I've heard Goose, who's obviously the founder and owner of Dashdot, say on a number of occasions that we are really a company that creates dreams for people that they can fulfill, helps people fulfill their dreams of who they want to be, what life they want to step into. We just happen to help people find properties that can get them to that goal. It could be property, It could be gold, it could be crypto, it could be anything. It just happens that property is the one that performs the best. And therefore, that's where we've built up this expertise. I want to ask you another question, though, as well. And that is, when we're explaining things to people who are interested in property, and you can show people all of the data, you can show them hundreds of case studies of people being absolutely delighted with the properties that were recommended and presented, that they've purchased, and the results that they've got, and data about the suburbs that we've invested in outperforming market averages by double-digit figures over 1, 2, and 3 years. So the whole argument about, anyone could have made property in this market, while true, no one could have made as much. Well, other companies, other people haven't made as much as what our clients have because we're aided by the AI. We can throw all of this data and all of this rationality at the market. We can explain it to people in a lot of detail about why these factors contribute to the success that our modeling has and that our clients have. And yet, that's all perfectly rational. We are, at heart, emotional beings. And it's something else that needs to trigger that decision. And I think you've hit the nail on the head when you're talking about fear. Most of the time, people don't actually know what they're afraid of, I would say. It's just scary. Investing this much or doing X is just scary. One of the most important steps, I think, is probably just to write down, what are you actually afraid of? If you are to make this decision and do X, whatever it is, it could be skydiving. And skydiving, you can have a pretty rational fear, right? You can write it down. The parachute doesn't open. Okay, that's a pretty rational fear. And then you can say, well, there is only a 1 in 1,000 chance that your parachute won't open. And then there's only a 1 in 1,000 chance that the reserve parachute won't open. So you've got about a 1 in a million chance that you're going to be in a bit of trouble. But you've got a 999,000, and don't quote me on those numbers. I don't want to get sued by, a skydiving company out there, right? They will have statistics that people will be able to look up with Google or with ChatGPT to find out what the actual numbers would be. But just as an example, that seems like a rational fear that you can quantify. And yet, you're still going to be absolutely terrified when jumping out of the plane for the first time. And that's what creates the exhilaration. That's what makes it fun in that situation. So when we're trying to articulate what the fear is, we need to be doing it in such a way that we are articulating this is a likely fear. If we're to go completely literal on what is the absolute worst that could happen, a solar flare can come out of the sun, it can cut through the earth and extinguish all of us in milliseconds. That's the absolute worst thing that could happen. And, look around thinking, well, I don't really need to spend my life worrying about that particular thing. So we also need to weight the fear based on how likely we think that's going to happen. And so when we're thinking, all right, worst case scenario for example, investing in gold, you could look at something like a 50, 60, 70% drop as other asset classes start to take over its role as a store of wealth. With property, the worst things that can happen, what kinds of things would we be imagining can happen if you're investing in property? The absolute worst things that can happen, there's a little bit of a correction in the market. You might get bad tenants. That might be a little bit of a headache. But corrections in the market, if you can hold for long enough, most people end up okay. Bad tenants, you can factor in a lot of things to try to mitigate that. And so the chances that you end up with one of these kind of disaster scenarios is really, really, really small. And yet there is still an emotional block for a lot of people. Now, you mentioned that our brains tend to fill in the gaps of the unknown. So how can an investor differentiate then between rational decision-making and cognitive biases that might cloud their decisions when they're evaluating investment opportunities or decisions?
Wow, great question. We have our biases that we believe are going to be X, Y, and Z. And that's going to happen no matter where we are in life. We have a range of different ones that are there. And it's only when we really explore what it is, like what's the worst case. And this is where I say to people, like, really ask yourself, what is it about that decision that's stopping you? Like, why is it that you're saying that won't work? Understand what it is. Like, some of these things that we have in life, they're beliefs that are driven, as you mentioned before, by emotion. And it's a little bit of, I guess where we grew up, our parents, our friends, our families, our how did we fundamentally come to believe these things are either good or bad? And if we can really, I guess, understand what it is, what's that emotion underneath there? Because the emotion that's stopping you buying it is the same emotion that we need to trigger for you to go into it to get it as well. And it's not the facts and figures. Like they're just the icing on the top. And what I tend to find with a lot of salespeople, they try to sell you on the facts and figures, and rationally it makes sense, but we're not rational creatures. We're emotional creatures, as you mentioned before, and it's the story, it's the understanding of what it's going to bring to us. What's the good that we could get out of that?
I think on one of the previous episodes of this podcast, of the Dashdot podcast, we had Gabby talked about how naturally humans have evolved to amplify fear as a survival mechanism. And you mentioned earlier, when you hear something in the bush, that triggers a fear response. Now, I'm a Kiwi originally. You go for a run in New Zealand, right? It's dead quiet, right? You just go for a run. Everything's nice and quiet. I moved to Australia in 2008, and I went for a run. And I went for a run at night. The amount of noise when you're running through the bush, right? Every 3 or 4 seconds is like that. It's like, what the... And that fear response, and what is it really? Okay, it was probably just a bush turkey or a little a water dragon, right? Or a turtle dropping into the water or something like that, right? It wasn't a crocodile, but, well, I don't think it was a crocodile. It was a few inland. It's nothing actually to be that scared of. Those other little critters, they're more scared of me than I am of them. And yet that fear response is like, what the hell's that? And yeah, I don't run in the evenings. I don't run after dark in Australia. I don't know what I'm going to be standing on or any of that sort of thing. And that is an overinflated fear that I think is probably a natural evolutionary response. And so when people are assessing, like, what are the things that could go wrong, they are generally a much higher amplification than what is likely to happen. That's what I would suppose. And so we do have these kind of competing forces. We have this big goal, this big dream that we want to achieve. We have a bunch of steps that we can feel very, very confident are going to help us achieve that. And yet we have this irrational fear that is amplified out of proportion to the likelihood of any of that stuff happening that holds a lot of people back. And I think it does take a leap. It does take, you can rationalize it. You can say, okay, it's just bush turkeys and water dragons and turtles and, the occasional snake that's not going to be anywhere near me. But still, you have to make that decision to put on the running shoes and just go out and just go for a run. And yeah, I'm going to be fine. What's the worst that can happen? Might stand on a snake, might get a nip. Okay, call the ambos. They get there. They give you some anti-venom. You're actually totally fine, right? It's not actually that scary. And that same thing, I should actually just run in the evenings. That same thing, I think, applies to so many things that we have in our lives.
It's very true, Emil. Like we need to be able to take that first step, and sometimes it needs to just be a small step. It doesn't need to be a huge step, but we need to take that one little step. And the more little steps that you can take that get you on that right track, to get you out there running, it's really learning to be able to, for me, it's the second step is the one that provides you with the most impact. Because a lot of people can take that first step. You can jump out of the plane and bang, I've done it. But can I do it again? Can I take that next step? Can I keep going? Can I keep that ball rolling? And one of the interesting things is when we talk about our biology, it's really understanding how it works. We can figure out, we can build all the pictures and the stories, and we can understand all of what it is there. But then when we take that first step and that second step, we get those positive hits of dopamine, those wonderful neurochemicals in our brains that help us keep chasing that reward. And really the dopamine that we get, it's not on achieving the reward, it's on actually the anticipation of it coming. So it's the more little, so for those that are really fearful, we can't take too big a step, because too big a step will just flood the body with, norepinephrine and stress, and then we'll go into that fight or flight, and build the picture. No matter how rational we can be, we'll build the picture that is going to be the worst case scenario. But if we can just come back a little bit, if we can look at saying, well, what could we go to start with? Where could we get into to begin with that's going to get us on that trajectory to where we want to invest and where we want to be involved in? We need to take that step and then another little step and another, because once you get the first little win, then you can go to the next one. And then you might find that the next step might be a little bit bigger than the first step or the third step. And so we can go a little bit more, and we're feeling more positive about what it is. And then we can start to put ourselves into that right frame of mind in being really in that positive state of desire of going, you know what, this is good. This is a good thing, and we're going in the right track. And because once you've understood all of the negatives, we can push that to the side, right? We understand what it is. We're not building, we're not tying ourselves up in knots over the fact of trying to figure out what it is, because we actually understand what it is. And so now we can take those small little steps to get the wins. And it's understanding you want to be stretched a little bit, because you don't want to be inside your comfort zone. And that's what the compelling future is. That's out here. We're chasing out here to get that compelling future.
I think a lot of our clients understand this very well, and they tend not to have too much of a problem going with the second step. We're normally inundated with people after they've acquired their first property with us. They want to go again. Step 2 is a lot easier than step 1. Step 1, well, the big step 1, that's the hard one for the vast majority of people. But like you said, you don't have to take that one big step as one big step. It can start with a phone call, and then it starts with working out what the plan is, and maybe sitting on that for a little bit just to make sure that it is genuinely where you want to end up and where you want to be. But that initial call, like actually bothering to go through with it and start thinking, I can actually create my dream life here. And so there is that duality of desire and fear. You have the desire at one end of this is the dream that I want to achieve. You have the fear. Is there any leverage in, because this is something that you've brought up before, how do investors leverage that duality between desire and fear to make more informed and strategic investment decisions?
Well, it's really, again, coming back to looking at, so for me, everything has to be about that compelling future. That's the desire. Where do you want to go? Why do you want that? Like, why? I mean, Simon Sinek, right? He was fantastic at looking at the question why. Like he's made a career out of asking the question why. But that's the same with anything in life. If you understand the why, I mean, a lot of people say, I want to be financially free, and I want to invest in property, and I want to have a whatever it be. But why do you want to have that? Why is it? What is it about that? Once they understand that, the decisions really become much easier to be able to take that first step, because if you understand the true desires between the risk and reward that comes with it, and you're in that position to be able to say, yes, I really want to do that, then maybe do that and take that step. Maybe it's what's the part that's stopping them? I'm just trying to figure out, like, what could it be for somebody who doesn't want to take that first step and buy that property? Is it too big a step for them? Do they need to be able to look at a smaller property or going into a shared way, or like, there's something that gets them that first understanding along the journey to be able to say, hey, that was great, that worked, now I go to the next one?
I think it's certainty. I think it's comfort. Your current situation, most people are in a comfortable enough situation, and comfort kills motivation. And so a lot of people, they're sitting there and they're like, it's not too bad. Yeah, I've got that dream, but that would mean that I have to take an action. And if I take that action, then I'm not going to be as comfortable as I am now, emotionally. I'm talking about emotional comfort, not financial comfort. Well, that may also be a factor, right? Because you've got to make an outlay. And so that, I think, is a big part of it. People are like, no, I'm quite happy with this. I'm doing okay. And what they fail to realize is that the danger of doing that, the danger of not being in an asset class like property. I've got very strong views on, I believe that the gap between rich and poor, or as I put it, property owners / property investors and non-property owners / property investors is just going to get wider and wider and wider. And so the fear for me is not being part of this group. That, I think, is important and legitimate.
I was just going to say, Emil, you're very right in the fact of it's comfort, because comfort brings certainty, as you said. And we all chase certainty. We don't like uncertainty. Uncertainty leads to more fear, worry, and doubt, because when we don't understand something, we fill in those gaps to make it what it is, so we can make sense of it. Because as humans, we need to be able to have that level of certainty about what we're doing, where we're going. But when you come back to a world where we live in now, the world is uncertain. A whole lot of it's uncertain. And the rate at which we are growing and moving, and even looking at some of the results that you guys have achieved through investments for your clientele, is the fact that I mentioned that before about exponential. You think about, as humans, we're very good at calculating in a linear process. Like, we can tell how far 30 meters is, like 30 steps away. We can all tell, you know what, that's 30 meters and we'll be pretty close to the mark. You know, we use that to be able to figure out, can I get to that tree before that certain creature catches me and eats me? And we still use it now. Can I get around that corner in traffic before the oncoming car comes? But in an exponential rate, this is where we get really uncertain, because we can't figure out what 30 exponential steps are. And if you look at 30 exponential steps, we're not 30 meters away. We're 1 billion meters away. We've gone around the globe 26 times. And that messes with our heads. We can't figure out that. And now when you're looking at things that happen investment-wise, where you can start to leverage off other things, that's where we start to go, oh, this is where it can be creative. But we need to just understand everything that's going on. We don't need to know all the steps, but we just need to have an understanding to be able to fill in the gaps of worry that come with it.
You've talked about the importance of holding on to that goal. And if you want to modify that goal because your personal desires have changed, because maybe you've met the right person and family becomes more of a priority, or you've picked up another hobby or something like that, or your values have changed, or there could be a range of your circumstances have changed, right? If you've suffered an injury or an illness that might be significant, then I would say that those are legitimate reasons for changing that goal. But what I'm hearing from you, the big message is, don't downgrade that dream because of fear. It's not a good enough reason. It's an evolutionary response to protect us from wild animals, and it overinflates our perception of what could go wrong. But chances are it's not going to happen, and you shouldn't unduly weight that and let it prevent you from achieving your goals, or you shouldn't allow it to downgrade what your life dreams are. I want to ask you one more question, because I know this is an area that you are extremely passionate about and extremely knowledgeable about, and that is, how does the understanding of neuroscience, and particularly flow states, right? Flow states is something I'm really into, contribute to improving something like investment performance and for individual investors? Like, is there anything in the neuroscience around flow states that's applicable or relevant?
Flow is an amazing ability that we all have. we're all actually hardwired to be able to tap into flow. And what it does is flow, whenever you see anything in regards to people achieving the impossible, that you look at something and go, that's just impossible. How did they do that? You'll always find there'll be flow at the underlying level of it. And a flow state is when we are performing at our absolute optimum. And you'll find that regardless of whatever industry or thing that you do, if you can do it in a flow state, you'll be far more productive and profitable out of doing it when in a flow state. And it carries on. And what I find is that if people can actually tap into their own flow states, and you'll find the easiest way to do this is to think about something you enjoyed, Emil, when you were a kid. What did you enjoy doing the most? Now, for me, it's surfing. I love surfing. And I've done it since I was 10 or 12 years of age, and absolutely love it. And so I get out in the wave and I catch some waves that come in, and I'm buzzing. I feel like I just go into the zone, and when I come back, I'm so much more productive. And what you find is that you're in a more positive frame of mind. And so if you're in a more positive frame of mind, you're utilizing the neurochemicals, things that we spoke about before, like we mentioned dopamine and norepinephrine, two chemicals that get released when we're in flow. But you also get anandamide and serotonin, oxytocin, all of these other chemicals that help us as well be in a far more productive state. And in regards to being in that state, then you can then start to make much more calculated decisions. You're not as in that negative state of like, oh, this isn't going to work. Now I'm actually more positive.
I want to ask you about that because, well, I want to tell you a story and ask a question. One of my big passions at the moment is weightlifting, Olympic style weightlifting, snatch, clean and jerk. And I find the way I feel after an Olympic weightlifting session is completely different from the way I used to feel like 3 years ago when I first started going back to the gym. About 3 years ago, it might be 3.5 or 4 or something like that. I'd go to the gym and you're doing your 3 sets of 8 to 12, 3 sets, 3 exercises per muscle group. It's a couple of hours. And at the end of that, you just feel absolutely broken. You've tried to break down every muscle in your body. You're exhausted. And then maybe you jump on the treadmill for 5 minutes to warm down or something like that. You feel kind of like you're broken. With the Olympic lifting, it feels like it's a totally different mental process or emotional process. I feel like I can get into flow state. We have a coach there who tells you what to do. You're doing all the stats. You're doing all of the routine. I'll be in the gym for 2 or 3 hours, maybe 3-4 nights a week. The feeling that I get after that kind of workout is completely different. Feel like you're absolutely just standing on Mount Etna. And I feel like it continues for a good 18 hours afterwards. You just feel like everything is just absolutely brilliant. It could be because it produces more testosterone, apparently. The 3 exercises produce a lot of testosterone in the body. Wood chopping, apparently. Wood chopping, Olympic-style weightlifting, where there's a lot of power, and rowing. Those seem to be the 3 exercises that produce a lot more testosterone. But the feeling that you have just feels extremely positive. Like after you've accomplished something, you get a dopamine hit. It feels like that's sustained for a long time. Is it your contention that type of exercise or being in that flow state, because it does feel like I'm completely in flow, right? I don't notice the clock on the wall telling me what time it is. As you consider it takes a lot of mental energy, right? There's a lot of mental energy that goes into trying to perform it with the correct technique and get a lot of things right to, 320 kilos over your head kind of thing. So in that state the following day, is it your contention that I'm a lot more rational in my decision making?
Well, you will be, and you're right in the sense that when you get into a flow state, and I want you to think about this, like you get half a dozen of those different neurochemicals released, right? When you hit a really good flow state. And when you have those released in the body, time can either slow down or it can speed up. it just becomes completely irrelevant to what it is. And so all of a sudden then you see other opportunities because you're able to join far-flung ideas that can come together, and then all of a sudden you can see a pattern in there. So your pattern recognition becomes so much better, and then your ability to apply those patterns within your own life, no matter what it be. So some of the things that you'd get out of being in the gym and training and being in that flow state, and while you mentioned when you first started you weren't getting that because you needed to get to a certain base to start with, and you know, I always say to people, I remember when I caught my very first wave, it was 2 or 3 months of frustration trying to figure out just how to catch a wave that wasn't any bigger than, you know, waist to shoulder height as a kid. And all of a sudden when I caught that first one, it was like time just slowed down. It was like amazing. I was transported to another realm almost. But that's the body's producing all of these chemicals that just flush through the system. And then when you have that, you are in a more productive, a more, a more rational state to be able to see the positive natures within things and what could be.
That is fascinating. Like, this is the first time I've ever heard of these downstream effects of flow state in affecting other aspects of your life. A lot of what I've read and heard about flow state essentially comes down to, you won't notice the clock and everything will just be working really, really well. You won't be experiencing emotional peaks and troughs throughout the activity or anything like that. You'll just go into an unconscious competence and you'll just be working through whatever it is that you're doing. And that can be at work when you're in a really busy fast food restaurant, right? My parents put me through school and my sisters through school as well, running fish and chip shops. And some nights when things were really busy, you turn around and like 3 hours have gone by just like that. And being in that flow state, I'd never heard of the downstream effects of, well, that's actually going to improve mental cognition and your ability to calculate and rationalize thereafter. And I think that's something that maybe makes sense in the context of Dashdot, because one thing that we seem to be, the culture of Dashdot is very much about self-fulfillment and trying to help people be the best versions of themselves. And work-life balance and the way things are structured gives people a lot of freedom to do those things that are very, very important to them. And so we have our whole Humans of Dashdot. We have a whole lot of stories and a whole lot of reels and posts that we put on Instagram and some of the other social media to showcase this. And it's great to be talking with you and be able to articulate what the benefit of that is, because it means that naturally, like after I've done one of the big workouts on a Tuesday night, like last night, I come in here, I'm feeling absolutely buzzing. I feel like I'm much more on top of the game in terms of the questions I'm able to ask and things like that. You multiply that throughout a company where you have, 80, 100 people who are all able to get into different flow states and then perform not just in a generally sort of happier mood because, yay, we've got a bit of work-life balance, but a lot of us, I would envisage, are entering flow states and are therefore able to perform at a much higher level, not just because we're happier, but because, as you've said, we have that different cocktail of chemicals being released through our brains.
You're far more productive within what it is. And the flow state, depending on the size, you can get you can have a micro flow, the conversation which we're in now, we're back and forth and we lose track of time with what's in there. Or you can have a macro flow where you get when you're into the gym or I'm surfing. And then the bigger the flow state, the longer it'll last for you as well. And it'll carry on for a day, 2 or 3 days afterwards. And so I would challenge any organization to literally take their people and find out ways to get them into flow state. What is it for them? Now, for you and I, it's the gym or surfing. Somebody else, my wife, she loves walking in nature along the beach. Another mate of mine loves playing in his band, and he gets into flow that way. So it doesn't matter what it is. Find the thing that you lose track of time in, no matter what it is, and try to do that 2 2 to 4 hours a week is what I suggest to people. Do that and see the amazing benefits it changes within what you do on a daily basis. You'll be far more productive, far more positive, and able to achieve a far greater a range of things in life. And if you're doing that, you'll find that then you won't get caught in that, I guess, that fear, worry, and doubt of what could go wrong.
And yes, it will help you assess risk, manage your fears in a much more rational way, which will ultimately allow you to make better decisions for your life, for your investment decisions, and everything like that. All righty. Matt, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. If people want to find out more about you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Oh, look, just through the website, mattbrady.com.au. You'll find all the information in there. You'll find Matt Brady on the different socials as well. So,
okay. And you've got a book in there as well?
I do have a book. They can grab that off the website. It delves far more into all of the stuff we've been talking about today as well. So,
all right, fantastic. All right, well, once again, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and would love to have you on the podcast again sometime.
Lovely. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Emil. Good luck.
Thanks.